It's hard for me to balance 4 screens.
2 o'clock, we're on.
Okay. Welcome, folks. My name is Jeff Bradley. You have tuned in to the COVID-19 Small Business Regulatory Relief Committee, and I am going to start off the meeting, if I could, by asking Representative Huggins if he would say a prayer for us.
Absolutely. Let us pray. Father God, we thank you for everyone here, Lord. We thank you for our state. We thank you for allowing us to serve. Lord, we just thank you for yesterday, which was Memorial Day, and we just ask that you be with all those families, Lord, that have lost their loved ones, especially those that are still fighting for us and the ones that have served. Lord, we thank you for all the things you do for us. Thank you for the blessings. Lord, just continue to help us do your work here. Let it be work that's pleasing to you, and just thank you for all that you do for us. In the Lord's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. I'm going to take just a second to introduce myself and then send it around the horn and ask everybody to introduce themselves if they would, please. Again, my name is Jeff Bradley. I am the chair of the committee. I represent the 123rd district, which is Hilton Head Island and Defusky Island. So, Mr. Chairman, if you could pick up from there.
Yes, sir. And I'm Chip Huggins, and I represent the House Regulations and Administrative Procedures Committee, and I represent Chapin and Irmo in Lexington County.
Hello, everyone. I'm Seth Rose, and I represent House District 72, which is a lot of downtown Columbia, and it goes into a part of St. Andrews.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm Stephen Long. I represent District 37, which is in Spartanburg County.
Good. Nice job. Thank you, guys. On the agenda today is we have 2 nonprofits per Mr. Rose's request. But by the way, Mr. Rose, I was at dinner last night with my daughter and a number of her contemporaries, and they said that you were kind of the member emeritus of one of the fraternities there for all the work that you've done for those guys. Somebody said, Mr. Bradley, do you know Seth Rose? And I said, well, I sure do. And he said, yeah, well, he and I have become good friends over the years. We've used his service a number of times. So I thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, we had at Representative Rose's request, we have asked a couple of, we tried to reach out to the nonprofit world and to the minority community and solicit their input on some of the obstacles they might perceive and their view of what's going on around them relative to COVID in the state of South Carolina. And with that, Megan, would you introduce Madeline, please, for us?
Yes, we have Miss Madeline McGee, and she is president of the Together SC organization.
Thank
Okay.
you, Megan.
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman, should I
The
proceed?
floor is all yours.
There.
Thank you. And I have prepared remarks, so I apologize if you end up seeing the top of my head more than my eyes. But I haven't quite mastered the ability to read and look in the computer camera at the same time. So again, thank you, Chairman Bradley, and members of the Small Business Regulatory Review Committee for this opportunity to speak with you. I am honored to share with you the perspective of the 800 members of Together SC and the roughly 17,000 charitable nonprofits in our state who employ 97,000 of our workforce and engage hundreds of thousands of other leaders in their work. As I said, I'm Madeline, and I'm the president of Together SC. We are the only organization in the state focused solely on supporting and strengthening our state's nonprofit and philanthropic community. We lead through education, advocacy, collaboration, and leadership. We've been around for about 22 years. You may have heard of us by our former name, South Carolina Association of Nonprofit Organizations. We changed our name 3 years ago to further reflect the diversity of our membership and those engaged in our work. And because we believe the world is a better place when all people work together for good, such as the work you do, we like to call ourselves your allies for good. And I want to thank you for proactively reviewing state regulations and considering the really unique situations that arise from the COVID pandemic and working to identify opportunities to make adjustments. Like you, we've been trying to do the same thing, and what we have begun is a series of conversations between our members and the heads of the state agencies. Director Elsie, I think you said, was on the call. He has, has met with our people by phone, not once, not twice, but 3 times, looking to understand the opportunities to better serve those that find themselves unemployed for the first time ever. And I cannot speak highly enough of his team and their effort to work with us. We've also worked with DSS. Tomorrow we're meeting with the new director of public health at DHEC, and LLR is in 2 weeks. So time and time again, we've been reminded that public health regulations, including environmental rules, are even more critical in the face of public health crises as we currently face. We know that the people who breathe dirty air or drink dirty water are much more susceptible to COVID and other health issues. We're seeing that in the data that DHEC has collected, and the fact that certain segments of our population are more adversely affected than others. And we know that low-income communities and rural communities and communities of color are more likely to have issues and impact. So we would say to you, thank you for looking at opportunities to relax regulations where they will help, but be vigilant that no regulations that protect our public health are relaxed inadvertently during this time. We have begun to identify several specific opportunities to work on these things, and I wish to share 5 of them with you today. 1, during this time, federal COVID regulation has wisely removed certain requirements for the unemployed who are seeking work in order to qualify for SNAP. There is a proviso in the DSS budget, hold on, got to get that number for you. Here it is, 3832 in the budget that ties the hands of our government at a time like this when they need the flexibility to respond if recovery is not as fast as we hope. We would strongly encourage you to put that proviso on your list of things to investigate and explore if there's not this must have changed.
Ms. McGee, can I interrupt you right there? Can you just give us a brief
Thank you, God.
a brief understanding of what you perceive it to be, what proviso 3832 is?
Well, as we know, the federal government has said is the requirements to look for employment, typically part of any unemployment program, have been lifted, because how can we look for jobs in the conditions that we're facing right now? When that period is, if that legislation is not extended, we will not have the ability to seek waivers of our own. And our government needs the ability to seek waivers should we not be ready to put those requirements upon people. So that proviso limits the ability of the governor and the DSS to seek those waivers.
Okay, thank you.
Second, and this applies to is for the unemployment insurance payments. Work with the agency to make sure that there are not regulations regarding the number of job searches, the manner of reporting those job searches, which must be online. And we know, despite an unbelievable ratcheting up of their workforce at due and a huge, but the phenomenal increase in their workload has made online access very difficult, particularly for those with limited resources of broadband and such. So work with DO to identify some of those regulations that may need to be removed temporarily or adjusted so that people can still qualify. Third, if we can give our state agencies the flexibility they need to continue their contracts with nonprofit agencies. Many of our members work very closely with agencies, and that's done through either grants or contracts, loosening those reporting requirements temporarily, extending the ability to renew a contract without extensive um, reporting procedures or application procedures, especially for those nonprofits that have had a long history of working with those agencies. We think that will free up the ability of our members to better respond to the needs of our constituents. Now is not the time to have nonprofit staff spending 40 hours writing a grants report or application. Now is the time to streamline that. And we're seeing our philanthropic partners do the same and saying, okay, let's get the money out. And, you know, we want to make sure we're using it when it needs to be used. We need to simplify those regulations. Fourth, to relax the LMR regulations around licensing credentialing, especially where there's the opportunity for reciprocity for professionals who are licensed in other states. This is particularly important in the healthcare field and the agencies that are working to ramp up telehealth. And related to that, our fifth recommendation is around the telehealth efforts that make the Medicaid reimbursement procedures more flexible and permanent. One of our members is the Fullerton Foundation, who's invested many dollars over many years in advancing professionalism of our healthcare. And they have actually done research into this area of work and have a in-depth report as to the opportunities that we would be delighted to share with you if that's an area that you wish to further investigate. So we welcome the opportunity to continue this conversation. We are just beginning to get into doing much of this work. We know that there will be more opportunities that arise as we work to implement the federal funding that is coming down in the programming. So we hope that there's a chance that we can continue to work with Megan and your staff to share with you the opportunities that our people who are really on the front lines working to deliver the services you want delivered, to hear from them. And I would be remiss if I didn't close my remarks by reminding you that when the General Assembly convenes, there is a Senate bill, Senate 719, that will reauthorize a bill that was put in place 5 years ago that allows charitable raffles for nonprofits.
Yeah.
This bill has resulted in roughly $3 million being raised each year over the past 3 years. If it is made permanent, and in times like this when galas are going to be online, we need those charitable raffles to raise the private sector dollars to leverage the investments you're making. And this tool, we think it's the opportunities for it to raise funds is exponentially greater, and we need that bill passed so that we don't find our good citizens aiming to help nonprofits and breaking the law without realizing it.
So what you're, just for clarity, this has been in existence in the past and it needs to be reauthorized by the General Assembly, and Senate Bill 719 is targeted to do that, but we need to address that so that you guys are able to have charitable raffles going forward.
Yes, there's a bill
Do I
coming
understand that correctly?
That's exactly it. There's a bill coming out of each of the House and the Senate that aims to do this. We passed the bill allowing charitable raffles, which are legal in every other state, but because of some of our history, there was concern that there could be abuse. And so a sunset provision was put in to allow us to test it. There has not been any abuse. It has raised great funds for groups that do important work across this state. And so we think that it has been proven to be effective, and we want to seek to make it permanent.
Well, that's excellent. And I think that is precisely what the speaker wanted us to try and identify, folks, situations like that where the General Assembly could have an impact. And I think that's the sort of thing we take back in the report that we're going to do. So, Ms. McGee, thank you so much. If that concludes your question or your comments, I had one question, if we could, or if I could, and then I'll turn it over to the others. And you mentioned relative to do in the unemployment scenario and the number of jobs that people are required to apply for. And then my interest is in you mentioned the reporting, the requirements for reporting, and you mentioned how, so I wrote down online input is hard at the present. Could you share with us a little bit about what's actually happening there? And just briefly, please, ma'am.
Yes. As I said, Director Elsie and his team had a call with, I think we had 50 of our members last week, which was aimed to do two things: to allow more nonprofits to serve as connections points. This is a terrific program that DO has put in place, where libraries and others can help those that do not have computers at home or do not understand the very complicated process of applying, help them walk through that process. And because the number of those seeking unemployment has quadrupled, we need more connection points. So we're aiming to help other facilities, our homeless shelters, even some of our child care facilities, our healthcare facilities, provide that service. But as Director Elsie knows, the online bandwidth is limited. And so there have been stories of people having to wait quite long periods of time to get access, and to use codes and things that they may not have. And so my sense is that the DO is ready to do all they can within the regulations in which they operate to serve those that you have charged them with serving. My ask of you is to help loosen those regulations where they need to be loosened so that they can do an even better job of that. It's not easy to be a dedicated state employee who wants to help and to have to be told the regulations require us to do it this way, even when you know there's a simpler, easier way that would be more effective and is doable.
Yeah.
Outside a few words in a bill.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
I don't know. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Representative Robinson from Greenville, and I
Yes.
was glad to hear you talk about those new connection points, such as libraries. Some libraries are still not open. So could you inform us of what some of those other connection points are?
So both the libraries and the work centers of DO are still closed. Some libraries, I'm not sure if it's all of them, but some have been working to assist people virtually. So if you know people that are having difficulty applying, I would encourage them to call their local library and see if their library is able to help them virtually. Also, the Palmetto Project is a statewide nonprofit out of Charleston that is helping people apply. And the South Carolina Appleseed is also helping people apply. Our goal is, as I said, the call was next week. Our goal is to help DO get as many as, a dozen other folks sites up and running in the next 2 weeks.
Have you ever considered making inroads with the South Carolina Department of Education, since they operate our local schools? And many of those schools have been open with the food distribution. So if they're open for food distribution, it may be that they could also be in a position to open up their computer lab so people could access those services from the schools in coordination with the superintendent and coordination with their food program, since the buildings are open.
So I think that's a brilliant idea. That would be a Director Elsie to Superintendent Spears. But if they think that that's worth doing, but they don't have the labor force, because we know how tight the schools are in terms of their workforce, I would say that the nonprofit sector would look to find partners who could come in and help with the assistance if that facility was made available. But I think you've got the ability for the person to know what they're doing and to work with them, and then the equipment that's needed to do it. But I think anywhere that there's equipment that might be available, we should find a way to allow people to apply.
And also through that Accelerate South Carolina initiative, it may be that this would be something that would be of interest to them, because with so many people being unemployed, and we have heard that some of those jobs might not ever come back. We need to have some kind of way before people get frustrated. We know the stress that's being caused by unemployment and the COVID virus. So who do you think could be the one to take the leadership with that? Is that something that your office could do?
Accelerate SC is absolutely, from what I hear, looking at the need for the expansion of broadband and the resources. And I think we all need to work with that. But I think this is a huge opportunity for collaboration, because it's not just
Right.
the cable, it is the laptop, the Google Pad, and it is the training. And I think those are roles that our philanthropic sector already, Google has done great inroads in Berkeley County, the Google to invest in an expansion of broadband for our students there. Already, many of our nonprofits that work in literacy are taking their classes that used to be in a classroom and going out and giving people tablets and providing online training. So I think this is a huge opportunity for collaborating around serving those areas.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your creativity and thinking. I think this is what's so exciting about this. I had a call within the first week with the man who runs Greenville Literacy, and I said, "How are you doing?" Because, as I said, their classes have all been, in the classroom. He said, "This is making us do what we should have been doing long ago. We all need to be figuring out how to make services virtual, because that's easier for everyone, or not, but many people. And where it is easier, we should allow that opportunity." So there's lots of silver linings in this cloud.
Could I ask the two of y'all to get together and maybe put together 2 or 3 paragraphs of what you've been discussing here, bring it back to Megan, and let us take the good name of this committee and share that with the Accelerate SC folks, because I think we can, that is using this committee as charged to assist where we're able. So if you guys are willing to do that,
Be glad to.
Is that okay with the balance of the members?
That's perfect, Mr. Chairman.
What's your deadline?
It'd be great.
ASAP.
I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm on vacation this week. But I can get you something. We'll get going.
Okay,
Glad.
thank
Yeah,
you. I appreciate that very much. Are there any other questions?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Just going back to 3832, the proviso. I
Yes.
want to be clear. Is that a state proviso or is that a federal proviso? And if so, where exactly? Because I've tried to look for it, I can't seem to locate it.
It's in the DSS budget. It is state. It was passed. I can give you a whole nother piece on that.
So we passed it when we did the budget, and we're going to have to come back and look at that again. So 3832. So
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
body of our budget in the state.
For a while, but South Carolina Appleseed has raised this issue along with others, but I think we can enlist their help in giving you the details you need, and Megan the details to include that in your report.
I've got it. Thank you very much for that. And Mr. Chairman, I'll be more than happy to discuss with Mr. James Burns anything that we've got like that. I call him my constituent, whatever that's worth. Anyway, he's a good friend.
Okay,
He's doing a great job.
thank you. Representative Long,
Sir,
are you, any questions on your part?
no questions. I would like to get that information so that it can be included in the report. So yeah, I like that idea.
Representative Rose? I see his initials up there. Maybe he had muted himself and is unable to reach it. Okay, well, Madeline, thank you very much for your time on vacation. I appreciate you stepping in today. And if you will work with us on trying to get that information together, we will definitely get it to Accelerate SC. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you guys for working throughout this time.
You're most welcome.
It's been easy.
It's our
We're here
pleasure.
with you. Take care.
Megan, could you introduce Mr. Brown, please, ma'am?
Yes, we have Mr. Brenton Brown, and he is the Public Policy and Community Affairs Director from the South Carolina Commission on Minority Affairs.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on today.
Welcome.
I come representing the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. We are a state agency that represents the socioeconomic development of the state's ethnic minority communities. I come bringing you greetings on behalf of our board of directors and also our executive director, Dr. Dolores Acosta, who was unable to be here on today. And what we would like to do is we would like to speak to some of the concerns that minority business owners have had across the state of South Carolina. I sent out earlier a memorandum from Dr. DaCosta that was detailing the results of a business survey that we conducted to minority business
Mr.
owners.
Brown, let me interrupt you right there. Has everybody had a chance to review that and make sure? I just want to make sure everybody got it as much as any. Did anyone not get it? How about that? Okay. See. Okay. Fine. Well, please go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. What we did was we conducted a business survey of about 10 short questions that briefly broke down into about 4 areas. The first area was to determine how the pandemic is affecting the revenue and staffing needs of minority businesses across the state, how government aid programs and regulations are affecting minority businesses. Third, how ease of accessibility to government aid programs are affecting minority businesses. And finally, what are the ongoing needs of the state's minority businesses as we continue to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and even beyond that? What we found from many minority businesses across the state, once again, we surveyed members of minority businesses from all the state's regions, the Low Country, the Midlands, the PD, and the Piedmont. First and foremost on their minds, of course, was access to adequate personal protective equipment. That was one of the number one responses that we got as to their belief in the efficacy of opening up during this time of uncertainty. Second, lack of government support specific to minority businesses. Next, we found that there's a need for materials to be produced in languages other than English. Our state, as of 2017, had a Hispanic population of about 6%. A sizable number of those members of our state constituency do not speak English as a first language. So having government agencies produce documents, whether it's from DHEC or others, to produce those in languages other than English are going to be critically important. Also, the need for materials and guidelines that are accurate, accessible, and clear. And then also having those guidelines placed at a central information hub. We have many different agencies here in the state of South Carolina that all do great work. So sometimes it gets a little confusing knowing where to navigate, knowing which exact agency to go to. So that's something that minority businesses have spoken about as well. One of the biggest things is bearing the burden of and the cost of implementing those particular regulatory guidelines and opening back up, especially with the social distancing and things of that nature. Next, having points of contact at different agencies and organizations that can provide culturally competent information for business owners of various ethnic backgrounds. And then having access to organizations or representatives who can help minority businesses through these uncertain times. Our agency is a part of Accelerate SC. We also have partnerships with South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce, with South Carolina DHEC, and also with DSS, as we are aiding communities going through this COVID-19 pandemic. We have fielded phone calls from members across the state, whether they be individuals or business owners, and how to navigate the unemployment process, and how to get access to unemployment benefits, learning more about how the pandemic is affecting people's health. But of course, we had many concerns for people about opening back up the economy in a manner that is going to be safe and that's going to be viable. Some of the recommendations that we were able to glean were the earmarking of funds specifically for states' minority businesses. Many of the businesses were not able to access government aid programs through the CARES Act for various reasons. Across the nation, only about 40% of minority businesses were actually able to access those funds. And that's a higher percentage here in South Carolina. So having funds that are earmarked for the state's minority businesses is something that we deem to be critical. Next, making sure that a regulatory agency is being tasked with allocating and distributing on those particular funds, and then there being some sort of formal accountability along with that mandate for allocation and distribution as well. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have, but as I said before, our state's minority business owners, they are concerned about the state opening back up. They do want to open back up, but they want to make sure that they're doing so in a manner that is going to be healthy and helpful to not only themselves, but also to their clientele as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. I have a question. I have a couple of questions for you. One on the material presented, and another relative to your constituent population being unable to access the federal stimulus money. Would it be helpful to establish a conference call with your members with a crackerjack person on the EIDLs and the PPP stuff? Would that help?
Yes, sir. We have facilitated those webinars through the South Carolina Business Development Center. What we have found is that a lot of minority businesses do not have the contacts with financial institutions that were able to apply for those funds. Many of the people who responded to our survey indicated that they applied for EIDL, or they also applied for PPP, but because their banking institution did not have those existing relationships, they were either turned down for those funds, or the funds were exhausted before they had a chance to receive them. But we definitely welcome the opportunity to have another public forum to educate members of our community about what those funds are and how they can get access to it.
Well, if you would reach out to Megan and she in turn could reach out to me, I would be happy to try and organize a conference call and produce a number that folks can just call in and ask questions of an expert and see if that would help. Look, if we could get one or two through that process over the hump, I think that would be worth the time involved in making that happen. So if you would like to pursue that, I encourage you to reach out to Ms. Diethoff and see if we can make that happen. Is that okay with you, Megan?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I'll be pleased to do that.
Mr. Chair.
I have a question.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead since you're on the screen now? And Mr. Huggins, we'll come back to you in a minute.
Well, if he hasn't finished, let him go ahead and finish.
No, I think Mr. Brown is finished. You have the floor.
Oh, okay. Well, I had a question for Mr. Brown.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
wanted to know, since banks in the state of South Carolina operate under the auspices of the regulations of this state, and if that bank is Wells Fargo or BB&T or whatever that bank may be, are there policies and regulations that we could put into place to make sure that those banks carry out their civic responsibility in terms of facilitating the disbursement of funds to all small businesses? I really am concerned that some of those banks may not have the apparatus set up. And I want to know what we can do to make sure that if I'm a small business and I bank at Wells Fargo or BB&T, when I walk in that door, with it being a state regulated bank, I want to be sure that they're able to facilitate my assistance from the Stimulus Act.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything we can do with that?
Yes, ma'am. I think establishing connections between the Small Business Administration, when those funds were disseminated through the SBA, they were dispersed through those financial institutions. What we find is that many of our minority businesses are in rural areas where there may not be a Wells Fargo or Bank of America branch. I can think of rural Orangeburg County, for instance, where I have family and my wife's family is from, where you might have a farmers and merchant bank. And I can't speak, I'm not a financial expert, I can't speak specifically to those banks, but just as an example, a lot of these small town banks may not have connections to the SBA. And because they may not have connections to the SBA, their clientele may not have access to some of those funds. So that would be something that we should definitely look at, is strengthening the connections between smaller banks, community-owned banks, and things of that nature with federal resources and federal guidelines, so that, God forbid, if something like this were to ever happen again, the apparatus and the infrastructure would be in place for those small and rural businesses to be able to tap into the funds that they need to remain viable.
Do you think it might be possible for them to arrange that through the FDIC? Because all banks, including rural banks, are usually guided by the regulations of the FDIC. Do you think that would be a start?
Yes, I can't speak specifically to that, but what I will do is I'll do research on that and I can get back to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chairman Huggins?
Mr. Chairman, I just shared with Ms. Diedolf, Mr. Brown, Mr. Brown, you know Greg White with the SBA. Greg is extremely helpful. I know he would be glad to help with Chairman Bradley's, you know, if we had a call or something like this, I think it would be awesome. And certainly I think James Bennett is on the Accelerate SC. That's probably from a bigger bank's perspective, but I'm with you. Some of these folks, they don't have access, and the access has been a problem. I've gotten a number of calls from a lot of those folks, and we've been able to help some, and but it's very tough when they don't have the resources. So I appreciate you and Chairman Bradley bringing this to our attention, because that has been a huge problem.
Thank you, sir.
Any other members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Brown? Okay, well, Mr. Brown, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Appreciate you checking in with us today. And let us know how we can be a further help with the EIDL or the PPL, and we'll be happy to try and organize something with some type of assistance, whether it's provided with I think probably the best thing to do would be to get some South Carolina experts on the phone, like Mr. White. I've heard him speak several times, and you let us know, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Yep, thank you. Delighted to have had you. Okay, guys. Has everybody had a chance to review what Megan has done for us with a first crack at this? And if we're certainly open to Mr. Brown, you are welcome to stay or you're welcome to go, whatever your pleasure is, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I would love input on what you folks would like to see and get involved in the report itself, and any suggestions you might have.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I thought your comments earlier about what Ms. McGee and certainly Mr. Brown shared the specifics of the things that this particular committee could do. And I think Ms. Diedolf's done a great job of sort of comprehensively putting that together with things that we truthfully can try to do, not only as this committee, but as we make a recommendation to the General Assembly. And I think you've done an unbelievable job, and I want to say thank you for that. But I will certainly offer, I think the input's been great that we've gotten here. Those were some great things today that were very specific on things we can do to help with this.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Okay, I would like to see more. I appreciate the pros that you've done, Ms. Diedolf. I would like to include as maybe, and if it's okay with everybody else, what I'd like to see is maybe the specifics broken down into 3 recommendations. One is regulations that we can actually address that truly fit in the scope of what the speaker asked us to do. Then maybe which are regulations and potential statutory changes. And then the things that we've identified, like the couple things that we hit today that weren't necessarily in our purview, but we've, through our due diligence, have happened upon them. And I don't want to lose those, even though it may not be in our purview to really make much of a change of that, but we can certainly elevate the things we've found and include that. And there was a third thing, but that slipped my mind, so I apologize. But Megan, you and I can work that out, if that's okay with everybody, to try and delineate what we found out in little tranches.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd agree with your assessment on that. If we can break it up a little bit, and then if we're able to be more specific on some of it, I think that could be helpful as well. because some of these recommendations are kind of general, which is great. And I think that the recommendations should be made generally, but also specifically if we can.
I agree with you 100%.
Absolutely.
Absolutely agree with you. Mr. Rose, do you have any thoughts?
I totally agree. I'm good with that.
Okay, excellent. Any other input anybody would like to make for the good of the committee and the good of the report?
Two things, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'll share this with Megan, and you all probably know this better than I do, but there are two people that have been so helpful, I know, with businesses, not just in my community, but across the state, as these continuations of getting people back to work. Beth Webb in the governor's office, I don't know if y'all have had a chance to work with her. She has been great and is awesome to try to work with a business if they are close and they think they might be able to get open. The second one is Chantal Pryor at Commerce. And I will share these two names and numbers and emails with Megan, and she can send it out to everybody. But they're just very helpful on trying to work with businesses. I had 3 in my community get open that would not have gotten open this weekend had it not been for them. They were able to work the parameters out for them.
Well, that's awesome. And thank you, because it's always about who we can get on the phone to make something happen for folks. So great to have those names. I appreciate that very much. Anybody else? Any other comments, thoughts, questions? Seeing or hearing none? I guess that concludes the business of this committee today. And we don't have any more planned meetings at this point. We're certainly willing to accept additional public input right up until the very time we go to publication on the report. Don't want to miss an opportunity to gather and garner those inputs from everybody. But seeing or hearing nothing else, I call this meeting to a close. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I can figure out how to leave.